What's up everyone? I wanted to put together a short video today to talk about melodic development and show a simple way we can go about practicing this concept for our improvising when working on a specific phrase. This is also going to tap into how we can take phrases we've transcribed and turn them into usable vocabulary instead of just treating an idea as a one-off lick. We'll do this by exploring how we can adapt a phrase to work in different harmonic situations, effectively allowing us to develop actual language out of these licks, which we can then use when improvising and playing a solo. So developing a melody can happen in lots of ways, but what I'm going to focus on in this video is more of a technical process of how we can repeat the core idea of a melody and build it from different degrees of the scale. This is done by understanding the intervallic construction of a phrase, which can help us reverse engineer a phrase into a pattern. I'm going to use a line from the melody of Donna Lee as the example. Now, this tune is full of so much great jazz vocabulary, and there's actually a common saying that if you learn Donna Lee in all 12, you've mastered bebop. Well, this of course isn't the case at all, but there is some truth in it purely based on the fact that this melody contains so much of the essential bebop phrasing techniques. So if you can learn them in all the keys, then you're definitely on the right track. But it's not just about being able to play the phrases. What really matters is understanding the concepts behind them. That means breaking down how the melodies are constructed, and then once we analyze that, we can start using those ideas as a foundation for practicing the vocabulary, and more importantly, for recognizing those same sounds when listening to the music and transcribing. This is how we develop our understanding of the language and internalize new phrasing ideas. So the phrase we'll use happens at the end of the first half of the form. Not yet. This one. So there's a lot of subtle variations to this phrase if you like, but here it is slowly. Or I've seen it with an extra triplet as well. This is over the 2 chord and the 5 chord. So in our key of A flat major, that's a B flat minor 7 and E flat dominant, which then resolves to A flat major. Now this is just such an iconic phrase, which we really want to be able to understand and just play anywhere. So breaking down the phrase, over the B flat minor chord, we're actually playing a major 7 arpeggio built from the 3rd of the B flat minor, which would be a D flat major 7. This gives us an upper structure of B flat minor, which introduces the 9th extension. Using upper structures is such a common thing in bebop phrasing, and it actually happens all over the place in this melody. So if we're thinking of this phrase as a D flat major 7 arpeggio, well, we start the phrase on the 9th of D flat, which would be the 11th of B flat minor, and we play that just before playing the arpeggio. And the arpeggio actually pivots, which is another really common bebop technique. Basically, in other words, there's an octave displacement after the first note of the arpeggio. This is known as pivoting. We then land on the 6th of D flat, which is just the root of B flat minor. You'll see why I'm referencing the intervals based on D flat major in a second. The phrase then voice leads down to the 3rd of E flat 7 to bring out the dominant 5 chord tension. Another classic phrase, which again is based around an upper structure, where it's using a diminished built off the 3rd of the dominant to bring out a dominant flat 9 sound. There's also a sharp 9 tension thrown in just before resolving down to the third of A flat major. Now, to keep things simple for what we're discussing today, I'm just going to focus on the first part of the phrase, which happens over the B flat minor chord, so this bit. Now, even though this phrase is bringing out a B flat minor sound, the reason I'm visualizing it from the perspective of D flat major is because that helps me understand the core construction of the phrase. Seeing it as a D flat major 7 arpeggio just resonates better to me compared to thinking of it as a B flat minor 9 arpeggio starting on the third with the root replaced with the ninth. I've not practiced visualizing arpeggios in that way, but I have done a load of work on practicing major 7 arpeggios all over the fretboard. So that's a simpler way for me to view the construction of what's going on in the phrase, which then gets applied to B flat minor as an upper structure. Thinking of it in this core way is also going to make it easier to do what we're going to do next, which is work out where else in the diatonic scale we can play this exact intervallic construction from. If we're thinking of this phrase as being a major 7 arpeggio with the ninth played before it and a sixth played after, then all we need to figure out is how many of the modes from A flat major give us a major 7 arpeggio with a natural ninth and a sixth. I'm thinking A flat major because it's our key, and even though we're playing over the 2 chord, which is B flat minor, or for transparency, let's call it B flat Dorian, well, the modes of B flat Dorian are the exact same as A flat major, and I just prefer visualizing the other modes from the major parent scale. So we only get 2 modes in a major scale that give us a major 7 arpeggio with a natural ninth and sixth. They are the Ionian, or major scale of course, and the Lydian mode. Now, this phrase isn't what I would consider to be a modal thing. I'm just using my knowledge of modes and their construction to help work out where I can build this exact phrase from. So Lydian is our 4th mode, and the 4th of A flat major is D flat. So that's the one we're already playing. Now the other one was Ionian, which is just A flat major. So we can play a pivoted A flat major arpeggio starting on its 9th and finishing on its 6th. We can play both phrases consecutively. What's cool about this actually is that the last note for the D flat major phrase is the same as the first note for the same phrase applied to A flat major. So now maybe you can already start to see the thing where I'm going with this idea for practicing melodic development. Now obviously we're applying these phrases over our B flat minor or B flat Dorian sound. But in theory, these notes are going to work over any of the chords or modes from A flat major. That being said, depending on what the phrase is, it's always going to work better for certain modes more so than for others. If we apply the same thing to the next chord, which is E flat dominant, well, this chord is diatonic to A flat major if we're thinking E flat mixolydian, so we'd get the same options for the phrase. But let's do something a bit more interesting for the E flat 7 by choosing a different scale option. Just before getting into that though, I wanted to mention that as we've now broken down the phrase to see it as a sort of pattern, we can still apply this phrase to all of the diatonic scale degrees of A flat major, but the intervallic construction will of course get altered even though the pattern of the phrase stays the same. So what I did there was make the last note of the phrase the first note of the same phrase but built from a different degree of the scale. As you can hear, because this is being applied to every chord or mode from the scale, the pattern is being adapted to fit the diatonic intervals. We could just play the same phrase and not adapt the intervals. That would sound like this. that's more for practicing key changes or different fretboard positions, and not what we're focusing on here, as this will no longer work in the same harmonic context compared to earlier when we adapted the diatonic intervals. Let's take the phrase through the diatonic scale, but in order. Let's do it in position. That's the great thing about the pivoting technique. We're able to really stay locked into a position when playing arpeggios before running out of range. I've done a whole in-depth study on pivoting, which you can find the PDF for on my Patreon page if you want to check that out further. So getting back to our E-flat dominant chord, let's now change the scale from being a diatonic E-flat mixed Lydian mode to a different dominant tension option. Let's start with the classic altered scale. E-flat altered is the 7th mode of E melodic minor. Again, we need to try and find which modes from melodic minor provide a major 7th arpeggio with a natural 2nd and 6th. Well, in this case, we don't actually get this intervallic construction at all, so in order to make this phrase work for melodic minor modes, we'll need to alter the phrase. Let's try and alter it as little as possible by choosing a mode that needs the least amount of changes. Lydian augmented first comes to mind, as that's a major 7 sharp 5 arpeggio with a natural 2nd and 6th. Lydian augmented is the 3rd mode of melodic minor, so we'd play the phrase for G major 7 sharp 5 over E flat 7, and that will give us an E flat altered sound. So as you can hear, that really brings out an altered sound which resolves nicely to A flat major. Let's add the B flat minor chord back in by playing over a 2-5-1-6 progression. I was applying the altered ideas to the 6th dominant chord as well, because the F7 functions as a secondary dominant that wants to resolve back to the 2 chord. So it works great there too by thinking G flat melodic minor or A Lydian augmented over F7. Something I also found myself doing just then was altering the phrase to fit melodic minor, as that also only requires a 1-note change, just like the Lydian augmented option. So for E flat altered, I played an E minor major 7 arpeggio with a natural 9 and 6th, and then the same thing for the phrase applied to G flat minor major 7 for the F altered. Let's try a different dominant tension for the E flat 7. Let's imply E flat Phrygian natural 6, which is the 2nd mode of D flat melodic minor. This is going to imply a sort of 4 minor over 5 cadence to A flat. So that'll either be playing the phrase as D flat minor major 7, or as E, or really F flat major 7 sharp 5 over the E flat 7. There was a moment I played an F flat major 7 over E flat 7, which implies just a regular E flat Phrygian sound, because F flat Lydian is the upper structure of D flat Dorian, and D flat minor 7 over E flat implies an E flat 7 sus flat 9 Phrygian sound. Not always the best dominant tension, but in this case it worked great coming from playing the phrase for D flat major over B flat minor 7, as I just had to repeat the exact same phrase upper minor 3rd. So, loads of potential to develop even just a simple phrase like this one by applying it to different types of harmony. And Being able to improvise with just a basic motif like this really shows a solid command of the harmony, and more importantly, it helps us move beyond just playing licks. Instead, we're turning them into real musical vocabulary that we can draw on in all sorts of settings, just like I talked about at the beginning of the video. This can be done with any simple phrase idea, and it's just a great way to make your solos have continuity, because whatever phrase you decide to play is chosen because of what you played before it. So the reason you played the last line of your solo is because of the first line you played. This is the essence of melodic development, and what I've discussed in this video barely scratches the surface of it, but hopefully it can be a good starting point to get you to think differently about the phrase you decide to play and what you can do with them, or at least how you could go about practicing a phrase to allow you to do something more with it. Before we wrap up, let's quickly cover the phrase applied to all the melodic minor modes, just like we did for the major scale, because I'm sure there's some great ones, even if we do need to drastically alter the intervallic construction of the original idea. Let's think E altered resolving to A major now, so we're applying the phrase to all of the diatonic scale degrees of F melodic minor. So I hope you enjoyed the concept. I've mentioned quite a few modes throughout what I've shared today, so some background knowledge of chord scale relationships will definitely help in fully grasping everything we've covered. If you'd like to dive deeper into this material, you can check out my Patreon page. I've put together cheat sheets on all the parent scales and how their modes function, so that makes for a great reference tool for all the ideas I've shown here. I'll also be posting some extra PDF material on there for this lesson too. Anyway, that's all from me. If you found the video helpful, please hit the like button, as that's always a great help, and feel free to subscribe and hit the bell to follow for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, enjoy the practice, and I'll see you very soon.